Keith, thank you so much for doing this. This is an incredible honor. And just really, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I mean, this is going to be a lot of fun, I think. So
this isn't that many questions, I swear. It was a way that I could get it all out of my mind and then be prepared.
Well, I know that's a redaction from the 50-page manual you came in with tabs and chapters.
This is true. My first thing that I am most curious about is you've lived a long, fruitful life. You've done many different things. Did you ever imagine that you would be doing a roundtable discussion on Tourette syndrome?
No. No, it's always interesting how life grows and how things occur as we participate in them. So no, not at all. Certainly that's a very specific little niche thing. Highly specific. I've dealt more with general things and hoped someday to have the opportunity to really apply it specifically. And that happened with you and with what you went through and the courage you displayed much, much quicker. I mean, in a sense, all that happened with Tourette's comes from you. You came to us, we didn't come to you. And Tourette's was unknown to us to a great degree. You hear about Tourette's socially here and there, and you always wonder about what it is.
In the media, the movies, and different things.
Yeah.
So as you said, it wasn't like you guys were looking for someone with Tourette syndrome. I came to ESP just for my own reasons, having nothing to do with Tourette syndrome. Mm-hmm. And of course, as I went through it, I started to see some amazing changes. I was curious
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah. Yes.
Being a person, and I'll be completely straightforward with it. Being a person who's been on the news for being thrown off a bus, coming into a personal development curriculum must be even a bigger decision than for most people. Most people think, well, do I want to be that vulnerable? Do I want to, open myself up like that? You're coming into a thing with something that's already been prohibitive to you in many ways.
Yeah, I was definitely nervous before I came. I mean, things like yoga, that was off limits for me. Things that required quiet contemplation, those were forbidden for me just because it was, there was other people, it was uncomfortable for myself. But I guess my experience of the people that had told me about ESP, they had intrigued me so much, and it was worth the risk, of going to a program where there would be that kind of contemplation and I could look inward. And the other thing is I've lived a certain kind of life. I've had amazing parents. I've had amazing support that I had developed enough strategies to deal with the Tourette's in public and to try to make people comfortable.
Well, yes.
Although they were probably uncomfortable a lot of the time. But that wasn't the biggest, I wasn't very afraid about going to a course just because of the Tourette's.
Good. I like to think that we invite in a way that feels safe, and there are different philosophies of personal development, and I always like to think we're I want to say less militant, but we don't believe that people, for example, come through our intensives should have marketing done during the intensives. There's some places are very wed to, well, if you're benefiting from this, tell the world, that sort of a thing. And I understand that. I respect that. I respect organizations that have, a strong sales ethic within their product, within all of those things. But we chose not to for a number of reasons. We felt what we did was very unique, very deep, and we didn't want to have anything interfere, any motive interfere with that. And likewise, we wanted to provide a very safe environment. And we've had many important people come that want to remain anonymous, or we want to have that so that someone can feel just none of the constraints of the outside world interfering with their process, and be able to choose how deep of a process. If they want to just be more of a spectator, that's great. If they want to go all out, 10 and And that's great. And I'm glad that the people who invited you and how you became involved with us, that I assume that's what came across.
Yeah. You're saying something that just makes me a little emotional, just because, I had an amazing experience going through ESP. I mean, when I went through the first 5 day, there's a 16 day, I went to the first 5. It was a circus show with my tics. I was saying offensive slurs, and it was a very small group. But as I went through the 16 day and my Tourette's continued to go down, and then after the year, and as I progressively got better, what was so amazing is that nobody from ESP ever asked me to promote ESP because of what was happening to me. Here after a certain amount of time, I had overcome Tourette syndrome. And when I would tell people about it, people not in ESP, people would always say, "Oh my God, you must be their best, what's the term?
Poster child.
Poster child, yeah. And it was funny because you never had asked me, Nancy Salzman had never asked me to go publicly about this. There was was there not pressure? No one had even kindly asked me. And that was incredible. And it was really my own journey that I could go on, throughout the years.
It's funny. Again, it is one of the things that's within our culture. I like to think we are pretty good scientifically, that we think in a way that is, at least to some degree, objective. And when you run a personal development program, our main emphasis, our main belief is to have people experience more joy in their lives. And from that, all sorts of interesting effects appear to happen. May happen because of us, may not happen because of us. And I will say, within the thousands of people who've gone through, we've had some incredibly, you might call it, strange or wonderful happenings. And you could easily hold that up and say, we changed this condition. There's one person who in one of our intensives, for whatever reason, who knows, grew like 3/4 of an inch. They had some sort of release, I think, in their spine or their posture, who knows what. Yeah. Now, that could have happened on the playground. That doesn't necessarily happen from us. That would be at best a case study, an inadvertent case study. We certainly haven't done a double-blind study, can we? Yeah.
That's an interesting
But you have something like that, and should we hold that up as a poster child and whatever? No, because I'm sure there are many activities. Public school has probably had more than we have of those sort of things. So when people get really good results from us, yes, we do take testimonials at times or whatever, but we look at those results ideally as an effect of really the answer to the question, do you have more joy in your life? We would have been very satisfied with our results with you if you kept your full-blown Tourette's and all of that sort of thing, but came out saying, something, life's better for me. That's what we want. And a lot of times that translates to other things that happen within the life. And we really focus on that. So then if you have a bunch of testimonials where people say, well, life's better for me, oh, maybe it's not quite as powerful as the people who say, well, here was a person that, couldn't get out of bed and now they're a professional football player and they're an astronaut and they're a concert pianist, billionaire that does deep sea diving, and who knows? And we do have some of that. I think we have our share. But our focus, we do have a lot of things where we help people with measurable results that they desire, but really comes from the essence of what they desire. And sometimes it involves them searching their desires to really come down to the base of it. And that helps them. By recognizing the source of their desire, they can better craft how they can work with that desire within their life.
I mean, that's how I experienced it. like I said, I didn't come to try to get rid of my Tourette syndrome. I wanted to grow as a person. I wanted to become more joyful. And as an effect of working on myself, becoming more self-aware, using all the different tools, amazing changes started happening in my life with respect to the way I related to my family, the way I related to my work, my speeches. And as an effect of all of that, I sort of say it's the icing on the cake, and my Tourette's went away too. Mm-hmm. And that, but the funny thing is that me losing or not having or overcoming, however you want to describe it, mm-hmm. overcoming the Tourette syndrome is that was so small in comparison to what I was experiencing internally. And that's been a beautiful thing.
Well, that's important for me to hear, because that's what we want.
And thank you.
You're welcome.
So
questions.
So as we've talked about, I came to ESP. I took some. I wanted to know, do you remember how the Tourette study came about? Like you had heard that I had come in. You had heard that Nancy Salzman.
I'd met you with Tourette, so to speak, to some degree.
What was that like?
It was interesting. I look at it. At times, it was disarming because I wasn't sure how you were experiencing it, and I wasn't sure if, because there's so many communications that are done that are nonverbal, and in interacting with you with the Tourette's, I was wondering how I was coming across, and if, because at times it was abrupt, some of the tics were very abrupt, I wasn't sure how you were concerned of my concern, along with what my concern was also. So it's, I don't know, in a way it's like dealing with, if you have some sort of I can't even think of the best metaphor. Don't mean to compare you to an animal, let's say. But if I'm dealing, but not you as an animal, but it just more as some sort of something you're interacting with. If I'm interacting with a dog, let's say, and that dog bites when it sees red, because red scares the dog, and I see that dog does bite, and I don't quite know that red's the thing that stimulates it, I have a certain apprehension. And in the apprehension, I'm also wanting to make, especially if I want to communicate deeply with the dog, I see sometimes this dog's biting, sometimes not. What am I doing? And then being concerned with what's going on with the dog. So there's a lot of extra processing. Sometimes I like to, and most of the time, I like to just be with a person. And sometimes that's the very thing that people don't want. Sometimes people prefer a whole degree of protocol and mannerisms. So I'd never dealt with anyone that had that sort of communication interruption. So at some point, what I experienced with you is we'd have this really great connection, and then there would be a tick, and it would sort of be abrupt. And then I wouldn't know, did I do something? Did I offend you?
Oh, interesting.
And that sort of a thing. So, it was interesting for me to see my own processes with respect to that sort of communication, what I perceive as an interruption.
Yeah, that's. Thank you for sharing that, because when you're living with it and you're ticking all the time, I mean, it's a crazy internal war that's going on inside here. I'm thinking about my tics, I'm thinking about what are other people thinking about me, and so I haven't. You're one of the first people that have shared that sort of a similar thing was going on the other side, but in a different way.
What did you have apprehension of? What I would call first tick? In other words, you meet me, say you've come to meet me at volleyball.
I think that's where I first met you. Yes.
And all right, here is Keith Raniere. Do you worry about how your first tick will go?
Sure.
So that brings it on to some degree, maybe.
Yeah, I guess. I've never thought about it that way, but yes, I mean, anytime I was meeting somebody for the first time, I mean, it's kind of hard to remember the exact breakdown of how it went, but yes, I was thinking about them seeing me. At some point, they were going to hear me tick.
Right.
there was this constant
After
thing
someone
going
you've known for a while has been broken in with the tics, you can actually be much more comfortable.
on. Yes.
So that was, and probably, oh, that's interesting. I bet you the nature and frequency of the tics changed.
Yes, absolutely. Well, especially, I mean, the biggest thing happened was after I finished the 16-day over a whole summer, June to August, did the whole 16-day. From September to May, now I'm back on the road speaking, going around the country. I did no more ESP. I don't even think I did any of the one-on-one processes that I could have done outside of the classroom. By that May, I was showing up to my gigs, and my tics were so low that I had to start fake ticking because these schools were hiring me as a speaker with Tourette syndrome, and I'm showing up, and I'm thinking, it was because I didn't know exactly what was happening. I mean, the whole thing was new, and it was exciting. It was kind of scary. It was kind of everything in between. So the frequency did change once I even started going through ESP. But then even pre-ESP, when I was really stressed out, if I saw a hot girl, if I saw certain situations, I would want to start to tick more. It was definitely a roller coaster all the time.
So from my perspective, when I hear that, it's pretty clear that your Tourette's is gone. And the sleep studies and things like that would indicate that. Of course, the question is, how much did we participate in that? It can go everything from whether you take an ESP or not, because there's a percentage of people, I think you said it's 50% is a round figure, where the Tourette's subsides and goes away. And maybe it was your time. And that's a very real possibility. Again, it's nice if we can help people that way, if we can assist people with their lives, and that makes their life better. But really, whether your Tourette's went away or not, if your main goal was to feel more joy and enjoy existence, someone with Tourette's and someone with sweaty palm syndrome or whatever it is, someone who blushes a lot, someone who, I don't know, a bunch of other things that are of the body. So what? If they feel more joy and they're more accepting of themselves, and it's not something that, if you will, it's not like going out and being violent or something like that, that's what's important. So, the original, even in what you're saying, well, what did we participate? And that's, I think, what was the thought, the genesis of the whole Tourette study, was the thought that, well, maybe we did, maybe we didn't. Let's investigate the question. And still, with what has been done up till now with the Tourette's thing, literally, I think it's deepened the question. The question is, of course, do we assist, and how do we assist? People would say that the results, we've brought it to scientists. You've brought it to scientists, where they say your results are too good. I don't believe your results can ever be too good. Your results are your results. Your understanding of the results is a different story. I don't see our results as too good. I see our results as interesting. I see our results as promising. I see that in the worst case, we have an interesting way of selecting people who are going to, within a very short time period, overcome their Tourette's, whether it's from us or not. But we get to observe it. We get to measure it. We have all these measurements that we're doing, scientific measurements, the EEG, the sleep studies, all of these different things as they go through this process, and sometimes even in a matter of hours, all of that thing. So were we good at, selecting them, or was it a certain small percentage of the Tourette's population that we select that are ripe for this sort of intervention? We don't even know. We do know that somehow the people that get through the gate, our demographic of people that actually take our treatment, the results, the observed changes in their Tourette's are great. Do we know what the exact cause of that is? Not yet. It's a question for study. I think what we have now is enough data, enough of the raised question to warrant more study. But the thing that's great is in the process of getting to that question, there have been now 8 people whose lives are measurably better, that they feel better with their lives, and this Tourette syndrome has changed for the positive as far as all of them are concerned, I think.
I would agree too. I mean, especially, I know the one gentleman that just came in a couple weeks ago, he had Tourette's for 36 years. So I think he's 44, started when he was 6 years old. Horrific, just devastating Tourette's, limited his life in many different ways. He came, he came on a Saturday or Sunday. Mm-hmm. Monday morning, he worked with Nancy Salzman. Mm-hmm. That morning, started with her maybe at 10 a.m. We went for maybe 2 hours, took a little break, went for another 2 hours. So a total of 4 hours. Mm-hmm. And after those 4 hours, his Tourette's was probably down 95%. Mm-hmm. And then we all went out to lunch and we're just eating lunch as if you would never know. Like if you had joined us at 2 o'clock, that was just Joe Schmo that was with us like anybody else. You wouldn't have known for a second that he lived 36 years with Tourette syndrome. So yes, I do think people are experiencing benefits to their life, but also to that question of how is that possible? I mean, do you have any idea, or what do you? How could that be?
I have beliefs, and I think the human potential, what humans can do, is incredible and amazing, and more importantly, the difference between what humans believe they can do and what they actually can do is an incredible differential. Now, I like to bring up all of the things that we've seen, like in athletics. You have the guy who played Tarzan, who is an Olympic swimmer, apparently, so the story goes. He had some sort of world records, and they believed that he had just the perfect build, the extra long arms, I think it was, and a whole bunch of things that they had thought that humans would really never be able to substantially beat his records. And nowadays, apparently, his records are being absolutely eclipsed by 14-year-old girls. The whole thing about the fastest mile, and this is something we have in our brochure, just because it is amazing to me, and just amazing to me. I never cease to be amazed just that we do this. And I think most people have experienced it, but the big picture is here, humans are trying to beat this 4-minute mile thing. 4 minutes, a pretty arbitrary thing to begin with. Our clock, what's a minute, all this sort of a thing. But to run this distance that we call a mile in 4 minutes, people have been trying to do this for such a long time. And there's this competition between these guys. And finally, Roger Bannister breaks the 4-minute mile. After decades, and medical professionals speculating, well, maybe humans can't run that fast or run much faster, and they're shaving off to finally beats it. The next 18 months after that, 50 people beat the 4-minute barrier. One person opens the gate. And that we see this as children, you're a little kid and as boys, I don't know if you ever did this, had little bike jumps or little stunts that you try to do, jumping off the roof or
Fort stuff.
Right, yeah. Whatever it is. And the first time we try it, we're really tentative, and then no one can do it. Then one kid can do it. By the end of the week, everyone does it, and they're on to the next harder thing, because that's the way we are. We limit ourselves. What we call a limiting belief is just that, a belief that is limiting. It means it's a false belief. It's one that later ultimately can be shown just wasn't true. We have this in so many different areas. So we have all these people born with different neurologies, different existences, different experiences. We want to be able to empower people. And I think we have a very strong methodology to help people remove limiting beliefs, but particularly dealing with the way our will interfaces with our body, our neurology, our viscera. And we have these different techniques that help people, if you will, drive their vehicle better. And if they have this urge to tick or things like that, even if it's a subconscious urge, we have a methodology that helps with that. And it appears that we do. And we've been studying it for years. We have different ways of studying it. The Tourette's Project is a specific, very specific, interestingly measurable thing. And when I say interestingly measurable, as I said, even if we never came up with exactly, and I believe we know what we do. I believe we know what we do with our method to a great degree. And I could be completely proven wrong. But what is true is you have now 9 people that came in.
Well, there's me plus 7 more now.
Or 8 people.
We've got 2 more that are
coming,
happening
right.
soon, yeah.
So, okay, you have these people that come in, certain measurable things, and they come out, and they're different to a way that makes their lives better. And in some cases, I think there's people who couldn't ride bicycles or couldn't drive or whatever, able to do those things where they couldn't. That's important. Even if it's just that we're selecting people at a crucial time, we somehow, I don't know, our brochures, our way of recruiting, whatever it is, selects the people that are ready, and we can observe this. We have very valuable data of people undergoing the process of going from what you might call full-blown Tourette's to close to 0 in a matter of hours, and we have data on exactly how that happened. I should say exactly what happened. Do we know exactly the exact how? We may never know that. We don't even know exactly how bones heal. You know, you have a broken bone. You can chart out all the chemical reactions, biological reactions you want, but the question of why does that happen? Why does that go? Well, it's an endothermic reaction or, endogotic reaction. You have extra heat in the area. Well, why? Why does that happen? You can always go to the why, and there's always the why you can't answer. And the nature of science is just always pushing on those boundaries and making clever guesses and trying to verify them.
Well, we seem like we have, this is just my experience, that our culture, maybe other cultures, but is stuck on the why. Mm-hmm. Like we get very fixated on the why that happens.
You mean our cultures in America?
Yeah, in the United States, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you have that experience or not, but like even in the field, right now, if you look around the world with Tourette syndrome, there's, hundreds of thousands, probably millions and millions of dollars into research of looking for the cause, looking for why does this happen? Mm-hmm. I guess my question to you is, do you find that to be, where does that lay in level of importance?
It's a very funny thing. Why it happens and that it happens form an interesting system. If we were always just looking for why, we would, in a sense, annihilate existence. It's almost as if you want to look at it as 2 different processes. Some people can be very, very obsessed with why they exist, and some people can be very, very obsessed that they exist. They just want to experience existence itself without any whys. Then there's some people who are completely obsessed with the why, and so obsessed with the why that they don't experience that they exist. And somewhere in between those things is what you might call a healthy, practical existence. Now, you could sit and meditate all day long and just experience existence all day long, and then you don't get the bills paid. There's a practical nature. Existence isn't just a state of being. There is, by necessity, practical interface with the world. And the balance, I spoke about this in a few other places where we have chaos and structure, and we also have other dichotomies. We have, being and doing and those sort of a thing. And other people have spoken of these things. Experiencing life as a hybrid of the two, and that there's no right or wrong, we sort of find our way. Because the moment we think we know something, if you look at structure versus chaos, that's a very structured statement. and it pulls it pulls us, what you might say, away from truth. And if we say, well, no, you can never know, you don't know anything, that's too much chaos, pulls you away from truth. It's very Heisenberg uncertainty principle-esque, you don't have the two things known at once. You have a balance of the two within a certain certainty. And that's how we carve out life. That's how we carve out ourself. That's how we carve out even ethics in an ethicist's type of existence. When we weigh out an ethical dilemma, it's an ethical dilemma because it doesn't have a single solution. There is no right way. There's understanding all the ways deeper. And the more you understand the problem, the more you understand the depth of the possibilities, and the more you can take what you've experienced in your existence and bring it to bear. And that's what we call wisdom, the ability to really harness your life experiences and bring them to bear in each decision. Not only do you understand the problem more deeply and why you might decide one thing or another, but through doing that, you understand yourself more deeply. So by studying the problem, we understand the problem, and we also understand ourselves. And here's this constant systems approach. It's not definite, but it's progressive. And likewise with the Tourette's, on one hand, it may be total happenstance. On the other hand, we may be a totally causal agent. It's probably something very much in between. And the more we study it, the more we do it, the more we gain an identity of it and an understanding of it. Will we ever exactly know? No. Will we ever, gain some insight? I suspect so. So it has this interesting carving thing. So we've started to carve out this understanding, and this helps us even understand what we do, what you might hypothesize is a neurology. The current medical belief, I think, of Tourette's is that it's a neurological thing. Some of the interventions involve things like deep brain stimulation, and you were telling me about a case where they go into someone's brain, they put in certain equipment, and that became infected. They had to go in and remove going in and out of someone's brain is pretty tricky business. It's pretty intense.
Yes.
And I know Tourette's can be socially have pretty rough consequences.
It's a nightmare for some people.
Yeah. So sometimes desperate situations require desperate measures. I think we're fortunate that we've either witnessed, participated, caused probably some mix of those things for 7 people's lives to be substantially better. And now we've gotten better at it, so we can do it in a matter of hours, where in your case you went through a journey with our curriculum, and it wasn't in any fashion that was organized to help you with Tourette's. That was a side effect, but the side effect was it went away.
Yeah, what took me about a year, probably about a year and a half, what took me about a year and a half has now been replicated in about 4 hours. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty wild.
Well, at the time, and nothing against you, but the time you went through the year and a half, we weren't focusing on Tourette's. We're focusing on you, and Tourette's was a thing. But now we focus, more on helping someone adapt with that specific thing within a body, within a neurology. Just like some people find that, like I'm left-handed. There are a bunch of things that I do differently because I'm left-handed. If I insisted on not doing them differently or didn't believe I could do them differently, I would have all sorts of problems. But I do believe that I can adapt. I can use other strategies. I can do other things, and left-handedness can be a real advantage. So my particular 1 in 7 or 1 in 9, whatever, I think it's 1 in 7 people are left-handed or something like that. There are a lot of strategies I can use to drive that slightly different automobile of a body differently. And is Tourette's neurological? May well be. In a way, it's beyond what we worry about. You present a certain stimulus response profile. We help you expand. We help you design or change, whatever, that stimulus response profile. And maybe 50 years from now, if they ever come up with a way of specifically finding the exact physiological thing that says, this person has Tourette's, they might be amazed that a whole bunch of people, including yourself, have this Tourette's thing but don't exhibit any of the symptoms that are often exhibited with Tourette's. Left-handed people often, who knows what, maybe they often trip over their right foot. That doesn't mean all left-handed people have to, and if they become aware of it and develop strategies to work with their left-handed vehicle, they don't have to. So it seems, from our perspective, that at least the people that we've dealt with Tourette's, maybe it is genetic, maybe it is neurological, maybe it's none of those things. Doesn't matter to us. They don't have to drive the body that way.
With respect to people that see the results, sometimes I've shared with them, what's going on, and sometimes their first response is, well, what credentials do you guys have? And I want to know if you could just elaborate on that, because it's funny. We have these amazing results. We've had 8 people, two, all of them are at least 70%, and then 6 of the 8 are down over 90%. So, these are just unprecedented results, but there's still this feeling of, well, you guys don't have any credentials. I wonder if you could
I can answer that. I could be,
What do you say? I don't even know what to say to that. But
there's some... admittedly, I am sometimes politically incorrect. I'm a smart ass. I come from a very witty Italian family that all my life, part of affection was being a smart ass. So I do have a smart ass answer that comes to my mind right away. This is our credentials. We have sterling credentials that we have no credentials in the field. See, credentials seem to be self-limiting in the field. So what credentials we have? We absolutely do not have any of the any of those certifications or trainings that have been used so far to treat the problem. Now think about it for a second. If I told you that there was someone who had some sort of a problem, and they were consistently going through to a certain type of person to solve this problem, wouldn't you to go to, what do they say? To try the same solution to the same problem over and over again and expect a different result is a type of definition of insanity. One of the things. So, okay, if you keep on going to the same type of people to solve the same problem and you're not getting a solution, better to go to a different type of person. Better go to people who don't have those credentials. So the smart-ass answer is, our credentials are, we don't have any of those credentials that didn't work in this case. That's smart-ass. But then again, what sort of credentials do we have? Do you need credentials for everything you do? So, all right, how did the first person get their credentials? Even if you look at the credentials of a medical doctor, which are extensive and regulated and stuff like that. If you look at 100 years ago, what it took to be a medical doctor, it was very not standardized and very strange. And, and 200 years ago, that even gets to be stranger or whatever. Credentials come from somewhere, from some initial thing. And our field is relatively new compared to, say, the medical field and other things like that. And, all right, we have credentialed people. We have doctors who've come through. We've had psychiatrists who've come through. I consider myself more credentialed as a scientist, I guess. And I don't have a lot of high-level credentials, but I think I'm a good scientific thinker. And I've done some exceptional things in my life. I've done interesting things in my life. I think that my credentials are, I'm an interesting person, I'm a controversial person, but most importantly, I'm an unconventional person. And in some cases, when conventional solutions don't work, maybe the unconventional way of thinking does. I consider myself pretty rational. I consider myself pretty scientific. I always strive to be more so. So my credentials, first, are that I'm a human that cares, that's had good amount of education and has done a number of interesting things and done some things well and done some things that maybe I might think are done well that other people might think are done horrifically. But I'm certainly colorful, unique. So, I don't know, if you're trying to solve a problem and you keep on going to the establishment and you keep on getting the same answer, which is a non-solution, sometimes you want to go to something that's unique. Now, is it specious, ridiculous? Does what we say not make sense? I don't think so. I think most of what we say makes sense. It's not grounded in mysticism at all. It's not grounded in a lot of things that maybe are highly effective but are unexplainable. We have at least an explanation for what we do. And it doesn't rely on anything that's outside of being verified in the future or that we verified to some degree already. So, what's our credentials? We make sense. I think we make good sense. And does it matter? Some people ask, they talk about, well, do you have double-blind scientific studies? Maybe we'll do that. Those things are useful tools to discover why. But if you're trying to shoot for the moon and you land people on the moon, you can't say, well, that didn't really happen because you didn't have the right credentials. There is a result. How much we cause the result is the question, but we do have this interesting either witnessing or participation in it. And I do believe, the fact that we can take someone who has this thing that is theoretically not curable, from what I understand, theoretically, they need deep brains, all this sort of a thing that sounds very hardware oriented, and using it's no hands-on, no nothing, no manipulation, nothing like that. Just conversation in 2 hours, have it measurably not there anymore. Either we're selecting the person very, very intelligently, which means we have a good method of selection. That'd be great. Imagine if we could select everyone whose Tourette's was going to go away and measure it, because that might help us with the people who we didn't select. That gives us a lot of knowledge. If we could, with most scientific events, if we could be at the right place to witness what happens, we would learn so much. So even if we're just at the right place, we pick the very 2 hours that this person who's had Tourette's for a long, long, long time is going to shed it, and we happen to know exactly when, and we sit them down and we can measure it, that's useful. So the bottom line is, I don't know exactly how much we cause it. I believe I have an explanation for it. I believe we have a methodology for it. It is certainly not double-blind tested, but the truth of the matter is, these people, we've witnessed them undergo this transformation, and it seems a lot like we participate strongly in the cause.
With respect to what we were just talking about, of sort of how we don't exactly know why it works, but we know how. We know the methodology that we use and how we help people. I want to ask you about that. All the participants, working with Nancy Salzman, when I talk with people, I say they used the technology rational inquiry. And I'm an executive coach in ESP. I understand what that is. But when I talk to people about that we have this technology, I think the first thing that comes to people's mind is machine. There's this thing, and I try to explain to them, no, you don't understand. There's no machine. This is a conversation with people. I'm curious as to why do you call rational inquiry a technology, and then how do you see that works, or how does that help, or how does the methodology work and help people with Tourette's?
Well, you could call it a methodology too, but a technology, if you look at the definition of the word, I think technology fits more tightly. We have a series of theoretical understandings that have procedures and methodologies with them that we apply to different situations to get certain types of results. Technology isn't all hardware. There's software technology. There's all sorts of human technology. There are people who object to that word, and you could say, as I said, methodologies or, knowledge base or things like that. But it is it is based on certain types of understandings and assumptions. We can challenge those assumptions and understand what it does to the thing itself. It is in itself, the knowledge base is like an object, and we apply it in different ways. So it's not just one methodology. It's not a single step-by-step thing. It's based on a guiding principles that are understandings. So I think it more fits into a technology type of a thing.
And
I believe it's because we are scientifically oriented that we would call it that.
With respect to when I tell people about what's happened, I say, look, Nancy Salzman worked with somebody in a matter of 4 hours, their Tourette's is down 90%. For people that are involved with the project, this is becoming kind of the norm, which is incredible for us, but for other people, I think it still just sounds too good to be true. Like they can't even imagine how that could be, even if you show them the results. Do you have any idea of what might be happening, of how the methodology works?
I believe so. The methodologies, the procedures, things like that are created based on certain understandings. You might say those understandings are innovations within the human psychology. There's patents that support around this and that are being pursued around this. To people who let's suppose they've spent all their lives trying to plow a field. If someone comes to their field with an ox-dragged cart, they look outside and the next day it's all plowed. It seems like a miracle. It isn't. It's a tool. I think we have quite potent tools, and I think our tools are unique. And that uniqueness makes the results, at times we get results where other tools don't get results, as is the nature with many tools. If you've never seen a saw before, suddenly the cut piece of log seems like a miracle. I don't think there's anything miraculous at all about what we do. I think it's very straightforward and explainable. We use what you might call a conversational type of technology, understanding. When Nancy Salzman first met me and I was demonstrating the technology, she's very well versed in many human performance technologies, and she wasn't able to see what I was doing. So it's certainly outside of those patterns. So, some people say, your tool's better, it's not a matter of being better or worse. Tools are best for the thing that they're, suited to do. And if our tool is unique, there are certain things that it is suited to do that probably no one else can do right now. Who knows, there may be a whole bunch of people that do it better later. But I believe our tool set is potent. I believe our tool set is unique. And for all the people that have worked with us, who've been involved, whether it's been medical doctors, psychiatrists, people who are specialists in hypnosis, people who are specialists in NLP, people who are specialists in all these different things, they come and they see what we do. Most of the time they can't see what we're doing. And then when they learn what we're doing, they say, wow, this is really unique, interesting, because we have reasons for what we do. So I think it's very potent. And I think it's relatively simple. It takes, in some ways, overcoming your own limitations to do it. But when we first started with using the main staff of our technology, I was going to program a computer to do it. I was looking to do that. Of course, with human sense abilities and the things that we can do with rapport and things like that, we can do more than a computer can much quicker. But there's a certain portion of what we do that I believe could be well done with computer.
Wow. I was just thinking about all my experiences over the last 6 years. If it would have been a computer instead of a person, that would have been.
No, a computer doesn't have the same sort of sense acuity and interpretation of that sense acuity that humans do.
But it is neat what you're saying is that it can be part of what's happening, though. It can be reproducible in that way.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we spoke of in the very beginning, Nancy Salzman and myself. We wanted to do these results without talent. We would always say, do it without talent. Do it like you didn't have any insight, you didn't have any even hypothesis, all these different things. Just do it like a machine without talent. So a lot of our results are doable and we teach them without talent. Talent on top, we can do some things that are pretty fancy.
Well, it's funny hearing you say that, or interesting, because when I went through my 16-day, and there I had, already some great shifts with what I was experiencing in my body, I tell people that the head trainers of that training, one had a background as a waitress at a cheesecake factory, and the other one was a bartender, meaning people that helped me profoundly with my journey didn't have a background in psychology, didn't have a PhD in understanding, the brain or anything like that.
The wrong credentials.
They had the wrong credentials, but they had dedicated years and years and years to, practicing rational inquiry and understanding the education. And that always blew my mind, that they could study this and it was that reproducible and they could help me in such a profound way.
Mm-hmm. The thing that stands in the way the most of our reproducibility are people's own issues and their own beliefs. And even their beliefs in what they can do. You're coming into that saying that believing maybe that a waiter couldn't possibly do that. If the waiter believed that, they would never be able to do it. Most of us can prove our limiting beliefs correct. If I believe I can't run a mile in a certain time, I can almost always prove myself correct. And especially if I have an issue of wanting to be right, then that's double fortified. I've not only proven my limiting belief, but I'm right, and that's a big plus for me. So
I know that one well.
Yeah, a lot of people have that, and that's something that's easy to, over time, transcend. The right, wrong thing sort of fun.
Well, so with respect to the technology and then the Tourette study, can you talk a little bit about the sleep studies and why did you think about doing the sleep studies? What have the sleep studies shown us? Why was it important? What is it showing about the unconscious nature, about Tourette's?
Well, I want to measure, obviously, in doing these things as much as possible, but one of my questions was, okay, are we teaching people just to be better, well-behaved? How much is the conscious mind working? How can we do this unconscious checking? And we'd even spoken to an external psychiatrist, a psychologist who does all sorts of testing. He does tests, helped us create the tests we use, the personality tests and things like that. And he was a specialist in this unconscious testing. He didn't have anything directly that could help us test that. We, of course, have the EEG, and we can see in that if a person's repressing things. We want to say, well, okay, someone has tics. Are they just repressing the tics? So if we taught them to be more of a pressure cooker of psychology,
sitting there.
Yeah, and that they in fact have the tics, but now in a sense they've learned to counter tick on top of the tics, so now that their tics sort of just doesn't manifest. It's in there, but it's
a still tick.
Yes, exactly. It's a freeze tick. Some people have the freeze tick.
Some people
have the freeze tick. So I was thinking, well, but we have this ability to do sleep studies, and with sleep studies, all right, maybe you can repress your behavior, your tics or whatever while you're awake, but while you're asleep, that's a different level. And if we could, it would be great to examine it, because if the sleep studies revealed that there was no change, for example, but the person's behavior changed, we'd know we're teaching a congruent form of repression. But that's what we would call it, and that's what we'd know what we're doing. If we got more of a sleep study that really showed the person was not ticking as much in sleep, that would have a number of effects. One, they get more sleep. Because some Tourette's people tick so many times an hour and are being awoke. They never get good sleep, it seems, and they're walking around tired and things like that. And then, of course, if this went away in sleep, you would know that even in some of the altered states of awareness where we're more free in our dreams, you're still not ticking. So it's a deeper level. And again, it was really nice to see the profound differences in sleep studies. But I think for me, what was really the candy, the thing that I really like to hear is some of the Tourette's people who didn't need to sleep as much and didn't feel exhausted all the time. Most people don't understand some people understand what it's like to have a rough night's sleep. Well, imagine having that every night because you're thrashing around, doing all these different tick things or whatever. It's not. I mean, you're a person with Tourette's and you're a person who had it in their sleep and it disturbed your sleep, yes? Or you don't know?
I actually don't know. I was actually surprised when I found out that you wanted to do sleep studies because I never even knew that people ticked. I never knew that people ticked in their sleep. And then once we started the sleep studies after me because we weren't measuring me in the beginning because mine was just sort of happenstance. Mm-hmm. But then, when I found out, it was so funny because
Did you feel you were more well rested after your Tourette's went away? Or
there's no question that I'm more well rested. Mm-hmm. I think it's a combination of the fact that I probably don't tick or I tick way, way less than while I sleep. But it's more about the day-to-day experience of there's no more internal war going on. There isn't this exhaustion of thinking about what are people thinking about me, and then also just all the physical energy that goes into ticking all the time, the chomping, the moving, so I think that
an injury.
I mean, all those things. So, but do I sleep better? I do think in general, just life is better. But I think, so for me, it's hard to say if I can say it's that specific variable.
But without mentioning some of the participants, for me, it was great to hear that they had to sleep less, they felt well rested, all of these different things. So that's good. I think, we're hitting at a conscious level and a subconscious level to a great degree. And I believe truly it is changing. And I do believe we participate in it. I'm not absolutely sure. I'm willing to be proven wrong. But I think because of the timing of it, the fact that within hours, now that we focus on it, I mean, we had within our understanding of the human psychodynamic, Tourette's fit in a specific type of place with a specific type of thing. And our hypothesis, it's an interesting stage in science, and I don't know if we're at that stage in general, but, a first stage in science is you categorize things. For a long time, biology was just that. It categorized things, just put them into families, related them to each other, came up with a type of theory. And then you start to hypothesize laws. And within that hypothesis of law stage, it's sort of interesting, because then you start to be able to experiment and verify those laws. And that's like a stage 2. You go into a stage 3. In stage 3, now you could use those laws to explain things and verify those things by experiment. So you verified the laws to some degree. Now you're using them as an extension. The final stage in science, or one of the final stages, is where you can use those laws to hypothesize something that's not been discovered and then discover it, like the Higgs particle. You hypothesize our equations that have been derived from this data and examining relationships and codifying these relationships through the scientific method now imply that there's this thing that we've never observed. And then to be able to observe it and verify that observation is great. We have these theories, we have certain categorizations of things. We have theories, if you will, you might call them equations or relationships or principles of how those things work. And then to be able to have someone with Tourette's come through, and people with Tourette's fit in a certain type of a category within our psychodynamic understanding, and to be able to use our tools to say, okay, this would make the Tourette's go away, the Tourette's syndrome, that sort of a thing. And to apply that and to observe it happening is interesting. And that doesn't mean it's happening why we think it's happening, but it may. It opens a wonderful question. So with you came and, although that wasn't the primary objective, a lot of the stuff, the Tourette's that you experienced, fell into certain things. And over that year and a half, you did certain sourcing, certain methods, stuff like that, that allowed that, if you will, to lessen. And was at some point, as you recognized it, desirable, I imagine, to you, probably scary to you. So I imagine what happened is you went through, and when you recognized it had gone away, in part, not all the way, did you feel fear?
I actually felt the fear pretty early on in the process.
Right. Okay.
Well, actually...
So then we probably dealt with the fear.
Very early on.
Yeah.
I mean, I did the 5-day, and then I think a few weeks later I went and did the middle 5-day, and I think it's the second day, you look at fear.
Yeah.
And I worked with Nancy Salzman because all of a sudden, she had come into the intensive, and I didn't know this at the time, but because she knew that I was there, because I had Tourette's, and I'm sure she was curious about what was going on. And I thought I was going to do, one of the sourcings with her, one of the conversations with her, and I thought that in that conversation, my whole Tourette's was going to just evaporate into thin air. And right before the conversation, though, again, I didn't know this at the time, but I ended up going to the bathroom, and I started like dry heaving, and all these things were happening because I decided that I was going to look at the fear of losing Tourette's. I had at some point I decided, you know what, maybe that would be a good fear. Just maybe it would be a good fear to look at. And I ended up having this huge reaction right beforehand.
The fear of the fear, in effect.
Yeah.
Because if you looked at the fear of losing Tourette's, you may lose it's very funny, these things are self-referential, and we handle those things. They're like tautologies almost. They, you have the fear of losing Tourette's, and then you have the fear of losing the fear. Most people have an attachment, or they have some sort of an issue, like I always say, they want the red Porsche. And if I'm a person that's really attached to having a red Porsche, and I come to someone to work that attachment, my internal processing, my internal loop sort of goes like this. I say, okay, I have an attachment to wanting a red Porsche, and I think I'm going to work that attachment. So if I work that attachment, it means I won't want the red Porsche. And if I don't want the red Porsche, then I may not get the red Porsche, because I may not even try to get the red Porsche. So then I'll never get the red Porsche. And I want the red Porsche. So I don't want to get rid of that fear. I don't want to get rid of that desire. I don't want to get rid of that attachment. So the attachment makes you attached to the attachment. If you're scared of losing Tourette's and then you're going in to work that fear, you'd be scared because what if the fear goes away? It brings up the same fear that you're removing. So we have ways of working that.
Yes. And obviously I wasn't even, maybe not obviously, even before I started the 5-day, I wasn't even aware that I had a fear of losing the Tourette's. But the 5-day had moved me so much, and I had enough shifts and began to have a certain level of self-awareness, very small level of self-awareness, that I realized that I did have some fear about it. And that was really the beginning of the journey of overcoming it.
It's one of the things that we strive to do is help people build self-awareness, build what some people might even call a type of consciousness. Babies are not born self-aware. The theory of mind, which is interesting, when you watch how a child grows, their sense of self and having an independent mind of other people develops not only in the first few hours and weeks and months, but years of life. And what you find actually is human self-awareness continues to develop, and many, many adults are, there's a broad range of self-awareness. Some people that are not very self-aware at all, some people that are highly self-aware. Now understand, self-awareness and morality may have a flirtatious relationship, but they don't even go hand in hand. You have people who are not self-aware at all, who are just really pure innocent gems, and you have people who are highly self-aware that aren't very, very nice. So morality and the understanding of compassion and building compassion is another dimension that we strive to build. So we like to build compassionate self-awareness in people that want that. And there's some people who say, no, I don't want that. That's great, because it's not something that we want to foist upon people. But the advantages of being self-aware and the advantages of being more compassionate seem, for the most part, to outweigh any reluctance to go in that direction.
I would agree. I mean, as I've been doing this work for the past 6 years, that's been my experience. I mean, as you build more self-awareness slowly, life becomes better, life becomes richer, and specifically in the case with Tourette's, I've been able to become less reactive to my body, and I've been able to take more control in that way, which is incredible.
Well, thank you. You participate in it. As the thing grows, it's certainly grown far beyond what I initially conceived. And it's really a study for me and an ongoing learning process to grow this body of knowledge.